We spent a lot of time on this channel recently talking about Barcelona's financial crisis, but today I'm joined by Adam Crafton of The Athletic to talk about what people inside the game think about Barcelona. Adam, you have just put out a piece which I think was very interesting because it includes a lot of insight from within the game. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the ideas that you got from talking to people about how they see this situation from Barcelona?
Yeah, well, I think at the moment there is this incredible sense of bewilderment. Right, I think a lot of people, a little bit like most football fans, particularly outside of Spain, are looking at Barcelona, seeing all these new signings, Lewandowski, Koundé, Rafinha, even Pau Torres, one of the most exciting youngsters in Spain, has chosen Barcelona ahead of Real Madrid this summer. And I think they're looking at it and just thinking, how on earth is this happening? And you know, we've seen some people vocalise that. Julian Nagelsmann, the Bayern Munich manager, said, you know, they're the only club that seems to have no money but managed to buy all the players. And I do think there is a strong sense of that, but I think there is also a sense of envy and resentment, because I think there was perhaps this feeling that Barcelona were on the canvas, right, and ready to be knocked out, and you didn't really have to worry too much about Barcelona anymore. And now they're back, right? That's the theory, and it's a case of whether Xavi can get the best out of these players now.
Yeah, and interesting that you should mention that, because we've also got a quote in that piece from the club's chief executive, a guy called Ferran Reverte, who talked about the fact that Barcelona were very, very close to actually being dissolved. They would have been dissolved, he said, if they had been a public limited company. So, yeah, is there much thought about that aspect of it, the closeness to which they came to being in real financial difficulty?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to when the current president, Joan Laporta, became president, so probably around 18 months ago or so now, you know, he was saying at the time that Barcelona were clinically dead, right? They're clinically dead, and then more recently he's saying, you know, they're still in the ICU. So like brilliant figurative language about Barcelona's current situation. And we know that I think the debts were 1.35 billion last summer. They had to borrow another 500 million to restructure some of those loans. Then they borrowed another 1.5 billion for a stadium and surrounding areas project. There's a huge amount of money being borrowed here. But what they've done this summer is pull these economic levers, which has injected cash short term into the club, which puts them in a far healthier position to be able to do business this summer. Now, what everyone realises is there is a risk-reward situation whereby their hope is by mortgaging the present to fund the future, that there will be this virtuous circle, that's what they call it, this idea that if we recruit players, develop the brand, develop the players as brand, then it will all come together and it will drive increased revenues and Barcelona can stay competitive. That's the theory. Let's see if it plays out that way.
You mentioned the word envy before, envy from other clubs, but we have a section in the piece itself about Leeds United and the sort of lengths they went to make sure that there were checks and balances to make sure that they weren't going to get any issues with the Rafinha transfer in particular. So can you talk to us about that aspect of it? A lot of these clubs have to do business with Barcelona, and obviously there's going to be a little bit of consternation about that.
Yeah, and they have to do business because despite all of Barcelona's problems in the last few years, there is still this enduring charm to playing for Barcelona. I mean, we saw Andreas Christensen when he arrived at the club. He came like clutching this card that he's written as an 8-year-old, talking about how he dreamed of playing for Barcelona. And with Rafinha, it was a very similar situation, right? He had interest from Chelsea, interest from Arsenal. I think Chelsea pretty much agreed a fee with Leeds for the deal, and Rafinha held out and he dug in and he said, I want to play for Barcelona. And it helped, you know, that his agent was Deco, who is involved with Barcelona as an external scout as well. So I think Barcelona knew to be patient, but those negotiations were tough because I think there is a sense of clubs around Europe looking at Barcelona and thinking, can they pay in installments? Like, do we trust them to come through with the installments? We want a lot of money up front as a result of their financial situation. There was even one proposal that Barcelona made, which was, although we might legally agree the transfer in the summer, that actually we only process it in January because there's a risk that he might not be registered. And obviously for Leeds, who are looking to sell this summer in order to cash in and get their money's worth, and also to try and rebuild their own squad, that just simply wasn't palatable. And you know, speaking to other chief executives in Spain, and they were saying, if we're going to do a sale to Barcelona, we want really, really strict clauses there around when payments are fulfilled and potential penalty clauses and things like that. And you have to be really careful with the legal wording around things like penalty clauses, but there is definitely, I wouldn't say it's a distrust, but an attention to detail that maybe goes beyond the normal.
I think the final area we should touch on really is the fact that a lot of the views about Barcelona within the game have been fairly negative for, I suspect, justifiable reasons on one level. But there's also the question of what else could Barcelona have really done. We've got a quote in the article that you wrote about from a former Barcelona executive who said, Laporta doesn't have a choice really. It's this path or shutting down or not competing at all and becoming irrelevant, a slow way to death for a club like Barcelona. So could you talk to us a little bit about that angle?
Yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to the way Barcelona as a club have changed over the past 20 years. I think maybe historically they saw themselves almost as like the aesthetic emblem of Catalonia, right? As, you know, we have a style of play, we have Cruyffism, we develop players from the academy, and they still see themselves like that. But I think that's merged now with a real desire to always be winning and a real fear, pathological fear of not being able to win and really compete and be in Champions League finals. And look, since Barcelona were last in the Champions League final 2015, Real Madrid have won it 4 times. That's a problem, you know, for a Barcelona president and Barcelona players. So the alternative was, you know, that you don't invest in the squad, you try and reduce your debts each year, and you become, you know, like any other club, right? And I think a lot of other fans of other clubs would look at that and say, well, yeah, that's life, right? If you overspend, deal with the consequences. What Barcelona is saying is actually the best way to grow is to invest. You know, and that's a form of economics that's used by governments at times and things like that. So it's not completely wild, but their view is if we invest, then the brand will grow, the commercial will grow, the revenues will go up, and we'll be able to get ourselves back on our feet. And they also think the only way to actually really grow is to make sure they're in the Champions League every season, right? Because that's where the huge revenues are, or beyond that, Super League and things like that. So their view is, yeah, okay, we could take this real route of austerity, but where would that actually leave us? And are we in fact better to take these risks in the long term in order to make money that way?
Well, this story is obviously going to run on and on. We've not seen the last of Barcelona, but if you want to read more about it, then you can read Adam's piece. There's also a really good Athletic podcast out about it as well. If you want to find those, then just check the link below.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. There are journalists dedicated to each Premier League team, so every fan gets the coverage they deserve, not just the big clubs. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.